50 years ago today, Carrie was published for the very first time. So it seemed like the ideal time to reread it. So here is my rereading Carrie vlog. Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm Dave Musson, at Dave Musson on Instagram, and this is the place where I talk to you about all things Stephen King. Now, if you watch along with me every week, you'll know that right now I'm going through the movies and adaptations of Stephen King's work, and if you've been here the whole time, you'll know that I've already covered all of Stephen King's books. But it's a special day today as this video drops, because today marks half a century since Stephen King's first novel, Carrie, was published for the very first time. And I'd been planning to do a reread of Carrie to coincide with the anniversary, and then I remembered that quite a few of you guys seem to like me doing reading vlogs, so I thought let's combine the two, and that's exactly what I'm going to do. So I'm actually sitting here recording this a couple of weeks out from the Carrie anniversary, but this is the start of my reading vlog, so I thought we should kick things off with a bit of an introduction. So over the course of this video, you're going to come with me as I reread Carrie for what will be the third time. Is that my third reread, or is that my third read? I think this is the third time I will have read Carrie, so my second reread. I'm very excited to go into it, and I think it'll be nice to have this vlog going through so I can just get down some thoughts as and when they appear. So yeah, I hope that sounds like an interesting video. I guess I'll find out if you watch all the way through. And hey, if you'd like me to do more rereads as a vlog, then let me know in the comments, because obviously there's lots of books to go through. And I mean, I'll check back in with this at the end, but I have a feeling that once I've read Carrie, I think I'm going to find it difficult to stop in terms of going ahead and going into the other ones. So yeah, I get the sense I'm going to be reading lots more Stephen King in the coming weeks and months, so I may as well vlog it, right? Sound good? Cool. By the way, if you're new here, welcome. Do feel free to subscribe if you enjoy this content. And hey, click around in the description because you'll find links to my Stephen King quiz book that I wrote a couple of years ago, as well as my own fiction, my newsletter, the Constant Writers podcast, which is something I have on this channel where I talk to indie horror authors about them and about their relationship to Stephen King, and a bunch of other stuff as well. But most of all, thank you for checking this out. I hope you're excited to celebrate Carrie's birthday with me. So let's get into this vlog, shall we? So first of all, before I start the actual reread, I've got to decide which of my editions to read, haven't I? Because I've got 3 of them. So let's have a look through them. So this one is my rainbow edition, the one from the mid-noughts Hodder rainbows with the blood red spine. Carrie White is no ordinary girl. I mean, no, she's not. To be invited to prom night by Tommy Ross is a dream come true for Carrie, the first step towards social acceptance by her high school colleagues. But events will take a decidedly macabre turn on that horrifying and endless night as she is forced to exercise her terrible gift on the town that mocks and loathes her. So there you go, that's a description of that one. Kind of okay cover. It looks more like a wedding than a dance to me there, but hey, it's got the blood red colour on, which is definitely needed. Then there's the Halloween edition, which, I mean, look at that cover. Sensational, right? And all it says on the back, first came the blood, then came the power. Carrie. Like it. And this is perhaps something I should do an unboxing video on, and I may even have already recorded this and scheduled this by the time this goes out, because hey, if ever I'm going to do it, the anniversary of Carrie seems like the right time. But this is my constant reader edition of Carrie, which I got in 2023. There's a box of stuff there. I think I did an unboxing of it on my shorts, but hey, maybe I'll do a proper video. So this is a hardback one, and then the world exploded. Nice end papers. To be honest, I don't think I'm going to have this as my reading copy. I think I should keep that nice and secure. So it's going to be between these ones, and look, not going to lie, I'm going to read this one. It's a nicer size, I guess. It's got a bit of a sort of nice floppy feel, so you can sort of get stuck into the book without breaking the back. And also, I'm going to be reading this probably at work, probably on the bus. I mean, that is a fucking cool cover to be showing off in public in the build-up to the 50th anniversary. So, decision made. I'm going to read this. And I don't think I need to say anything else here. So, from this point on, you're going to be catching up with me as I go through Carrie. I don't think it's going to take too long for me to read. It's just finding the time to read it, really, because I've got 2 kids and life and everything. But it's a short book. It's 242 pages, this edition, so it's not going to take me long at all. But hey, come on this journey with me. Let's see how we get on with Carrie. And I guess let's go, shall we? So, it's 11 o'clock at night. It's about 12 hours since I recorded the intro you just watched. I've just finished rewatching The Green Mile, ready for the channel at some point. Like I say, 11 o'clock at night. Am I going to go to bed? No, I'm going to start rereading Carrie. And it's somewhat fitting, given that I'm starting my reread on Tabitha King's birthday. And right here, right at the start, I quote, "This is for Tabby, who got me into it, and then bailed me out of it." That, of course, is referencing the well-known story that King threw his first few pages of this in the trash can, and his wife Tabitha fished them out and said, "No, there's something here, I can help you with some of this." And they got it done, and the rest is history. So yeah, I'm going to stay up a bit more and start my reread. Let's see how we get on. So I'd forgotten how interesting King's introduction to this is. So he wrote an introduction in 1999 that's in most of the editions now. And he talks about the real life girls who he went to high school with that sort of inspired the character of Carrie. It's quite moving the way he writes about them. But also just his reflections on the book itself. Like he says at the end here that the short novel which follows, which is Carrie, he says it as dated now, but still with a surprising power to hurt and horrify. And yeah, I think that sums it up pretty well. So I'm going to crack on with part 1, Bloodsport. 9 pages in, let's tick off some classic King-isms that we've got right from the start of the very first book. The very first page, we've got on 19, August 19th, 1966. Rain of Stones reported, the headline at the start. On 19, right from the start, great. When Miss Desjardins is introduced, this is literally how she's introduced. Miss Desjardins, their slim, non-breasted gym teacher. Straight to the boobs. I mean, he was in his 20s at the time he wrote this. It was the 70s. I mean, it doesn't excuse it, but gives it a bit more context, I guess. We've got internal monologue of Sue, and this book doesn't mess around. Like the plug it up stuff, the throwing of all the sanitary products, that's dropping on page 8. Yeah, really gets into it right away. So yeah, just thought I'd share those little things I noticed straight away. Oh, and another one. So I was going to mention that if you read the book, you know that there's a lot of sort of fake scientific reports and things interspersed with the narrative here to try and, I guess, make us think that this really happened. And actually rereading it now, it's a bit clunky. It's kind of jumping into the story way too much. I'm only 10 pages in and it keeps coming back and forth. But there's one line from one of these papers that fits in with the King-isms as well. They're kind of the foreshadowing that he likes to do. So this is in the paper from The Shadow Exploded. And just this line here that I guess if you're reading for the first time, you might even not notice, but rereading it stands out like it's flashing off the page almost. One of her surviving classmates, Ruth Gogan, tells blah blah blah. Yeah, they're not all making it out alive. Wow, so Mr. Jardin regarded Carrie as, and I quote, a fat, whiny bag of lard. Yeah, I mean, King has issues with how he writes fat people, and looks like it was here right from the start. Never in a million years would I have remembered that Mr. Jardin's first name is Rita. Someone called Rita in my son's class at school. He started school this academic year, and she was one of only 3 people in his class that he explicitly said is not invited to his birthday party. Don't know why I told you that, but I thought it was pretty funny. Same birthday as King, just a different year. I'd forgotten this lovely bit of graffiti scratched onto a desk in Chamberlain Junior High School. You ready? Roses are red, violets are blue, sugar is sweet, but Carrie White eats shit. It doesn't even rhyme. So I'm 25 pages in, I'm going to call it a night because it's midnight. Running low on battery on my phone for recording updates, and a little bit tired now. Normally I would read a bit quicker than that, but I keep stopping to talk to you and to make notes. But a couple of the things I'm going to pick out before I wrap up for this evening. So just on page 21 of my edition, it's when Carrie's walking home, there's just some really nice descriptions of just stuff on the sidewalk. So here we go, she's standing at the sidewalk, quartz glittering in the cement, hopscotch grid scratched in ghostly rain faded chalk, wads of gum stamped flat, pieces of tinfoil and penny candy wrappers. And we get a bit of internal monologue and then broken up again with a penny lodged in a crack. A bit more internal monologue. A dog turd with a foot track in the middle of it. A roll of blackened caps that some kid had banged with a stone. Cigarette butts. All these like short sentences that just really capture perfectly what a messy sidewalk would look like. So yeah, signs that he's an evocative writer right from the start and not just the scary stuff. And then there's another bit here that kind of made me think of Macbeth, actually. So she's talking about the red circle that surrounds Carrie. She said you could scrub and scrub and scrub and still it would be there. Not erased, not clean. Kind of reminded me of the out, damn spot out stuff from Macbeth, which I quite liked. And then just lastly, the little scene which is captured in the Department movie with Carrie and the boy on the bike. So it's Tommy Erbter, age 5. And one thing I'd never clocked before, but he's humming the Scooby-Doo theme tune, which of course made me think of Duddits from Dreamcatcher, that would be picked up many years later. Ooby ooby oo, ooh. Apologies for that. But yeah, sowing some seeds for future connective tissue to watch out for. But yeah, I'm 25 pages in. It's nearly midnight. I'm nearly out of battery. So I'm going to wrap it for now and pick up with my reread tomorrow. So day 2 of my reread. I'm on my lunch break at work. Got some food, got a seat, and I've got Carrie. So let's crack on with this reread, shall we? Ding 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 ding. So the Hail of Stones, something I'd forgotten was that one of the neighbours took a piece of one of the stones after it happened and took it up to the university to see if it was anything alien, and it was just ordinary granite, but kind of makes me think of Geordie Verrill in Creepshow. So a little idea sown there by the looks of it. So I thought I'd do an alfresco update. Finished my lunchtime reading blocks. I'm about 50 pages into the book now, so what, about a fifth of the way through. Genuinely enjoying it. Can kind of see why modern readers might bail at this point, because, you know, in this section that I just read, we've got descriptions of Carrie's breasts in great detail and how she's fondling her own breasts and even tweaking her own nipples, which, considering she's underage, is weird, and particularly in modern context I can see why that would put people off. Also, a use of the N-word, which is far from ideal. So yeah, I can understand why some people might bail at that point. But yeah, I think some interesting things. There's some stuff that really stuck out for me. There was an interesting bit where Carrie talks about, so there's the giant cross in their living room with a Jesus impaled on it, and how it gives Carrie nightmares, and she was saying that her nightmares are of Jesus chasing her down corridors with a mallet, which obviously reminded me of The Shining. There was a character reference called Vicky Hanscom, so I don't know if she's a relative of Ben or not, or whether it's a case of just King throwing a name out there. I know at some point in this book we're going to get a Teddy Duchamp, which is a totally different Teddy Duchamp to the body, so it might just be he was using a name, but you never know. What else did I like in this? I mean, we get a bit more detail, as I mentioned earlier, about the Hail of Stones. What else is there? I'm trying to remember now. I'll probably edit this bit out. But let me think. Oh yeah, just some really good writing again from King that really captures how good he is at writing the everyday. So I think last night I talked about the bits and pieces on the pavement that he described really, really well. There's a great description in the passage I just read of a child, like just how annoying small children can be. Like, it captures it perfectly. So the context is that Sue is imagining her future life, and how not all of it will be particularly good, but the way he describes toddlers, memory serves me correct, it was, he described them as repulsive little strangers who shit their pants and cry for help at 2 in the morning, which I just, reading that as a parent, just connected on so many levels. Like, you can tell that it's not meant to be hateful, but at the same time it was probably written at 2 in the morning when, for all the good intents in the world, you do kind of hate those little shits who have woken you up and I just kind of like feel like they're ruining your life a little bit. So I thought that was it's weird to call it beautiful writing, but I think it almost was. I mean, it was ruined by the fact that the N-word appeared just a few lines later on that very same page, so not great. But yeah, I'm still enjoying it. It's still a little bit frustrating that we've got all the scientific papers being thrown in. It kind of does get in the way of the story, and I get that it was quite of its time trying to set up this thing of like, this isn't just a horror story, this is like some secret thing that actually happened. But you know, we're a fifth of the way in the book now, and the strongest parts are absolutely the story. I mean, it's also, I guess, a young writer on his first book, and he's keen to show that he can do different styles, so throwing in like snippets of a magazine article and scientific reports and stuff. It's like, yeah, I get it, you can write different styles, but it's almost like, okay, I just want you to get on with the story now. Let's ignore criticism. I totally get why he did it, but again, it's something that might frustrate a modern reader. I almost wonder whether, like, I wouldn't go so far as saying we wouldn't get this book today. I think the story, this sort of story, you could totally imagine a modern horror writer writing, but I think it would be presented in a massively different way. I don't think modern audiences would have the patience with a new writer that Carrie does in some way require. Just being a bit wary because there's some geese over there and those fuckers do not mess about. Anyway, that's probably enough rambling from me for now. So I've finished work for the day, but it's kind of an awkward time because it's too early for me to go and collect my son from his nursery, from his daycare, but there's also not enough time for me to go home and do anything meaningful, because if I go home now, I'll just literally have to go out straight away again to get my son. So I've basically got 20 minutes or so to kill. So I'm in the car, I've got Carrie, gonna get a few more pages in. So a nice little bit of work here. So this passage is where Carrie has been sewing a dress on her machine, and she's been reminiscing about an afternoon spent, well, that afternoon spent in the closet after her mum got back early from work, having discovered that she'd been sent home from school because of her period, and Carrie was now a woman and all that kind of stuff. Anyway, the sort of thread, pun intended, is that Carrie is working on this dress while she's reminiscing on this. And just love this sentence, this paragraph, the use of like short sentences to just tease out little bits of information. And the sort of punch at the end is really clever, so I'll just read it. So, there, the dress was done. She removed her feet from the treadle and held it up to look at. it. It was long and ugly. She hated it. Just those last two short sentences. Great, just pull the rug out from you. So yeah, I enjoyed that. Wait a minute. Records flew all over the living room, dive bombing the occupants and shattering against the walls. So the Rage Carrie 2's iconic CD scene is actually taking inspiration from one of the case documents in Carrie. Interesting. How the heck have I never spotted this before? Carrie's 7th grade English teacher, Mr. Edwin King. And what is Stephen King's middle name? Edwin. And what did he used to do before he was a writer? He taught English. You sly dog. So, kids are in bed. Done a couple of hours painting because we had renovation stuff done not so long ago, and now we're doing all the painting. Basically, my evening is now free, so I can carry on reading Carrie. Got some M&Ms that randomly I managed to acquire at work today. Got my notebook to jot down anything interesting. Got my camera to share my thoughts with you. But most of all, got the book. So let's carry on with this reread, shall we? Two things I've been meaning to mention and keep forgetting. The first, you see this sentence in brackets here. This was a real marker of early King, where he'd like interrupt his own narrative with thoughts of the character. I think he still does it in Salem's Lot as well. But yeah, it's definitely noticeable in Carrie. It's here a lot. And the second thing I wanted to note was the inspired name for Susan Snell's book. My name is Susan Snell. Cool. Carrie keeps making this noise, and I don't know what it's supposed to sound like. I should just focus on reading, but just past a seminal, monumental King line. I'm talking, of course, about the first ever use of token nubs. Not great at all, but it's a part of King's history. So I know you have to take things into account, like when things were written, when things were produced, when you're judging them through modern eyes, but using the phrase the Maine Holocaust to describe what happened at the Black Prom in Carrie, where ultimately, 200 or so people died. Not the best phrase to use there at all. And in 2024, it certainly does not land very well at all. So just read the bit where Billy Nolan smashes the head of the pig with a sledgehammer, and the sound is described as reminding him of a time that he and a friend had dropped a pumpkin off a overpass onto the pavement below. It's pretty gross, but effective. Classic foreshadowing. So I'm done for the night with Carrie. I'm at the prom. We're about 5 minutes away from the prom king and queen being announced. In fact, there's a tie, so they're having a runoff vote to see who actually wins it. Tension is really starting to build nicely, and as I sort of remembered and sort of expected, the dips into the sort of fake scientific documents and articles are becoming less frequent because the story is taking over here. I still could have done with more story earlier on, to be honest, but there's a real sense of momentum building now, and something afoot. I mean, this is the third time I've read it. I know what happens, but I'm excited to read it again when I pick up my reread tomorrow. But for now, night-night. So, day 3 of the reread. It's lunchtime again. I've got my book again. I've actually already snuck in a bit of reading before work this morning, so very happy to just carry on and see where we get to. Approaching the finishing line now. So, I have finished my reread of Carrie. I'm going to mull over my final thoughts a bit and come back to that later, but just some things I wanted to get down on camera now. I was really struck by, in the climax of this book, when everything is going off and everywhere, that's almost where King's best writing in this book came out. There are a few lines that I want to go through just to show you how well he could write in the grips of everything that was going on. And, you know, when he wasn't thinking too much, when he wasn't obsessing over describing breasts or making pretty nasty racist comments, or throwing in all of these scientific papers. there are some lines that just really sing here. So I'm going to go through a few of them. So on page 181 of my edition, this is where Carrie is standing there covered in blood and the whole room is laughing at her. But we get this. They were still all beautiful. And there was still enchantment and wonder, but she had crossed the line and now the fairy tale was green with corruption and evil. In this one, she would bite a poison apple, be attacked by trolls, be eaten by tigers. Like, for Carrie to still recognise that it was still like this magical prom after what happened to her, I think that's a really, really powerful thing to throw in there. The next thing I wanted to shout out was where Carrie's starting to punish them. And just this line, again, just in the midst of everything, just one sentence I already struck. She heard some of them scream and it was music, sweet soul music. Really like that, that really cuts through. A couple of more I wanted to shout out. So later on when all of the residents are coming out into the street, basically sort of talking about how the residents are coming out to have a look to see what's going on, and then there's just this line of like, and some came to die. It's like, okay, cool, yep. And then just as an example, right from the bat of him being able to write something really chilling and disgusting. So this is someone describing seeing a body. Here we go. I stepped over 2 live wires and went around a body that wasn't much more than a puddle. I had to look to see where I was going. There was a wedding ring on the body's hand, but it was all black. All black. Pretty cutting, pretty effective, and pretty scary. So yeah, I'm gonna ponder the rest of this afternoon on some final thoughts, think about how I can wrap this up. And I already know right now that I'm gonna have to make this the start of another chronological reread. So who knows, I may even like come up with a way of starting an ongoing ranking so that in however many years when I finish this chronological reread, I can revisit my overall ranking and see how that compares, a more scientific one, to the one that I did sort of just using the heart. But yeah, finished Carrie. I mean, you won't actually need to give me this time because it will just happen next in the video, but give me some time to ponder it, do some final thoughts, pick out some things that I noticed for the first time this time around, and I'll come up with some way of rating, ranking, summarising Carrie. Sound good? Okay, well, I'll see you for now. Okay, I went to the Black Prom and I made it out. And, well, I had a thoroughly good time rereading this. As I've already said, I know now I'm going to have to embark on another chronological reread, and it's this one's fault. So, just to wrap up, I'm going to take the last few minutes of this video to sort of give some overall final thoughts, and because this is inevitably going to be a new feature, I'm going to try and build in some things that I will use in all of these rereads so that as we go through them I can maybe build a new ranking of my King stuff. So what I'm going to cover in this, I'm going to give some final thoughts, and then we're going to pull out my Stephen King bingo card that I made for a special a while back. You can check that out up here if you haven't seen it already, and we're going to see how Carrie scores on the bingo card. Then I'm going to give 3 pros for Carrie and 3 cons for Carrie to try and be balanced in how I'm evaluating it. Then I'm going to pick out some of the things I noticed for the first time in this reread. So a lot of these are connections to other works, or, well, I guess they're not connections because this was the first one, but things that we see crop up again. And then I'm going to wrap up with some sort of rating, ranking, and then I will leave you be. Thank you for getting this far, by the way. Whether you've just skipped to the end or whether you've watched the whole thing, I really, really appreciate it. So, to start with then, some final thoughts. As I said, thoroughly enjoyed going back into this. This tale that is kind of bookmarked by 2 humiliations that are bound by blood is just a riveting read. And this is the 3rd time I read it, and I still had a great time. And it's really fascinating, you know, knowing King's writing as well as I do now after all these years of reading and talking about him. Going back and reading his first effort, it's very interesting from that point of view. You can see, you know, he is not perfect out of the gates, far from it. There are flaws in this book. The writing's just not as good as he would go on to do. But you can see he's clearly trying to make an impression. He's trying to make his mark. And he comes out of the traps with an original story, an engaging story. And while there are issues with how he writes women in this book and in many of his early books, for his first book to be centered around so many female characters, not just a female protagonist, but basically all of the key players in this are women. I don't know. King always claims he's a feminist, and I've always believed him, but like right from the start, he's putting women front and center in his stories. Like I said, some issues, some big issues with how he writes about them, but I really enjoyed seeing that. Like I said, this isn't perfect, but you can see the potential here. He's clearly got active imagination. He knows how to hook you through the action. He knows how to make you squirm, and there's just a lot of potential here. And there are some lines, as I've already picked out in this vlog, that really, really do zing and just make my brain sort of pop and fizz at times. Really, really good stuff. As I've hinted at throughout this, the scientific papers, the transcripts from different hearings and testimonies and stuff, like I get why he did it. It feels very of its time, and it's trying to sort of create this myth around, oh, this is a thing that really happened. But once we really get going on the story, it does kind of, it causes it to feel a bit fumbled. It gets in the way, I think, is the main problem. And it kind of ruins the suspense in some moments, because we find out what's going to happen from the scientific papers and then we see it happen again. So you get this sort of cycle of repetition, which sometimes is a bit unnerving because you're almost tense because you know what's going to happen, but you want to see the full detail. And other times it's just a bit frustrating because we're getting the same time and time again. So I get why I did it, but I think I could have done with less of it, or I could have maybe had them in sections rather than interrupting the story and the prose like it does. What this also shows is that right from the start, he was great at capturing the everyday. I've already read you those descriptions of all the junk on the pavement and stuff like that. So he was an everyday writer right from the very start. And of course, he could do horror right from the start. We've got some fun deaths, we've got some crazy descriptions, some very vivid descriptions, like particularly the pig's head squelching like a pumpkin that's been dropped from a bridge, and that body that was little more than a puddle. All of those lines just really get under your skin and do a really effective job of making you go, nah, that is nasty. So let's go on to some pros and some cons for Carrie then. 3 positives, 3 negatives, and as I go through my rereads, I'm going to try and do this for every book. Some might be easier than others. Carrie, I think, was fairly easy to come up with, but let's go on to them. So we'll start with the positives. 3 positives I would really pick out from this. Number 1 is the action sequences. They're great. When you get to the part of the prom, when everything's going down, you are flipping those pages as fast as you can. Even when you're interrupted by the scientific papers, you're still burning through them. That bit just moves. Everything is happening, and as I already talked about, King still has an ability to throw in these lines that really do stand out. I think his best writing in this book is when things are really whizzing. Second pro I would pick out is how well he captures the cruelty of high school. And I guess high school girls, although the boys are not that great either, or the teachers for that matter. It kind of feels a bit cliched to talk about how the high school experience is portrayed in Carrie, because we've seen so many versions of it since. But you have to remember, this is one of the ones that really influences all of that stuff. So yes, it feels cliched in today's context, but chances are a lot of the stuff that you're thinking about if you're reading Carrie for the first time, maybe, Carrie probably had a massive influence on that. It does feel like a very real, lived-in experience of the nastiness that high school can be, and I think it really comes across well in the book and holds up 50 years on. Third and final pro is Margaret White. She is the absolute true horror of this book. Yeah, there are some horrific scenes and some horrible stuff that happen, but the real scary stuff here is Margaret White, because there are people like that, religious fundamentalists who are just shouldn't be reproducing. And the way she treats Carrie, the way she abuses Carrie, tries to assert her authority and her dominance on her, it's just awful to read, and you feel so much empathy for Carrie in those scenes with Margaret White. Like, she basically has no redeeming features. She is like the original overbearing mother in Stephen King's work, and I don't think he's written one quite as scary since, to be honest. So let's get into 3 cons, 3 negatives about Carrie to give us that balance. Number 1 has to be the obsession with breasts. Like, I get it. King had cut his teeth writing for men's magazines, and you need a certain amount of sex and all that kind of stuff to hook that audience. But really, when he's talking about girls in this book who are minors, do we need long, luscious descriptions of their breasts? I mean, the teenage boy in me is like, yeah, sure. But no, we don't really. We don't need to know that Chris Hargensen isn't wearing a bra and you can tell because of all the jiggling up front. We certainly don't need to hear about Carrie fondling herself and tweaking her own nipples. We don't need to know that Mr. Jardin doesn't have much in the way of breasts. We don't need to know about token nubs, all of those kind of things, much as some of those phrases are absolutely hilarious. While I've given praise to King for centering this story around women, the way he writes about them, pretty shitty. And I know this was his first book, and I know this is a product of its time, and he has absolutely got better at this. But this is the thing with literature, it stays there forever, and it's open to critique at all times. And I've seen lots of criticism from current readers taking a 2024 view on Carrie and just dismissing it altogether. You do have to put it in context of when it came out, but at the same time, I think even King himself would acknowledge that the obsession with women's breasts in this, underage girls' breasts, let's not forget, it's unhealthy and it's not great. Second, also not great, is the just needless racist and racialized language here. Like, there aren't any black characters, and yet we get the N-word, we get Chris Hargensen's swollen lips being described as negroid, we get references to Negroes as well, we get some casual racism against French people, which I think is very prominent in Maine and sort of the border region with Canada. There's slurs against Asian people as well. Like, again, product of his time, I know, but not good. Not a good look. Even like describing what happened in the book as the Maine Holocaust in one of the fake scholarly articles. Not cool at all. That is not a good word to use. Absolutely not. So yeah, some very problematic racialized language, which I can park and accept as being a product of the time and not being a reflection of who Stephen King is. But as a 2024 reader, it will put some people off, and I think it absolutely has to be acknowledged as a con. And if you're thinking about dipping into Carrie for the first time, be aware that you're going to see a lot of descriptions of boobs, and you're going to see a lot of terms that will make you go, no, I don't want to see that, thank you. The third con. We have effectively 2 rape sequences in this book, but they're kind of played off as not really being rape because there's enjoyment in both instances. There's no consent in either instance though. So that's not good. Again, product of his time, I know I'm repeating myself here, but those scenes which come as everything is kicking off towards the end of the book, they're uncomfortable to read, and they are meant to be uncomfortable to read. I understand that. But also, I'm not going to pretend like it's okay. And, you know, thinking about my own sons who will hopefully get into Stephen King at some point, I'd like to have conversations with them about those scenes and why they're not okay and what's wrong with them. But yeah, in terms of the cons, those are the ones. Underage girls sexualised too much, nasty racist language, and some rape scenes. Not a good look, is it? Contextualise it, yeah, overall a brilliant book, but those 3 things, I think if we were writing them now, we would not get. Okay, we've come out of the cons. Let's find our groove again. Let's go into the Stephen King bingo card, the Kingo card. So I was referencing the card, which I'll flash up on screen in front of me now. Here are the ones that I found in Carrie. So we've got the terrifying bully, obviously, Chris Hargensen. Small town, large cast, dark secret. I've said that's a half mark here because we've got the small town and the large cast. The secret kind of becomes national news. So it's not really a secret as such, but it's kind of sort of there. Another half mark also for the tendons creaking in the neck. I didn't find that explicitly, but there was a scene where Carrie's veins in her neck were bulging. And they're kind of similar, so I'm having that. Nubbins, I mean, if we could, we'd have about 19 points alone for references to breasts. So obviously, we've got amazing sex for the woman. There's the scene with Christine, with Chris Hargensen and Billy in their car, where she gets all angry with him and then makes him touch her and comes instantly, basically. And of course the rape scenes that we've already talked about. Magical Negro, I've put half a point because of all the racialized language. We obviously don't have any black characters, but I don't know. A big problem with the Magical Negro stereotype is lots of racialized language, so I think we're at least worth half a point here. And then whole points for 19, which I'll cover in a minute. Lots of 19s, way more than I was expecting. Last time he or she saw them alive, yep, we get that in abundance here. The dead dog, we get dead dogs here. They are granted memories of Billy driving and how he likes to drive around at night on the hunt for stray dogs, but we get dead dogs from the off. And of course, it's set in Maine. So that gives us a score of 8.5 out of 19 on the bingo card. So next up, I wanted to go through a list of things that I noticed in this reread for the first time. And there's a bunch of stuff here. Stuff that, knowing King's work as I do now, I get excited reading here because I know stuff like that is going to come up time and time again. I've kept a list. I'm just going to go through it. I can't remember it all off the top of my head, but let's go through them. So I already knew about Teddy Duchamp being in here. It's definitely not Teddy Duchamp from The Body because this Teddy Duchamp was dead in 1968 and had grown-up kids. So the timelines just don't match up with The Body. It's just a reuse of the name, like Patrick Hockstetter in Firestarter and It. Some other names I liked though. I mentioned earlier we had Vicky Hanscom, potentially a relative of Ben. There is a reference to a George Chismar, and of course in the real world Richard Chismar would go on to co-author some books with King, so that was an interesting spot. And there was also a character called Freddie Overlock. Wonder where he got the idea for the Overlook Hotel from. We also got Ralph White, first instance of a Ralph character. I'm convinced that, like, knowing how much Stephen King loves Lord of the Flies, one of the key characters in Lord of the Flies is Ralph. I'm convinced he tries to get Ralph in as much as possible. And again, first book, we get a Ralph. Also, as I mentioned, we've got that 7th grade English teacher, Edwin King. Can't believe I'd never spotted that before. If you don't remember that far back in the video, Stephen King's middle name is Edwin, and of course he did do a bit of teaching before his writing. So Edwin King, the 7th grade English teacher for Carrie, it's got to be him, right? Some other things that pop up. So when it's all going off at the end, Sue and a lot of other town members get what is effectively the shine, albeit briefly. Mentioned earlier the idea of taking those rocks that Carrie brought down from the sky and taking them off to the university. That's just like the Geordie Verrill sequence in Creepshow. There's a couple of things in here that crop up again in Dreamcatcher many years later. So we get the child singing the Scooby-Doo theme tune, but also when Carrie is going through Sue's mind, it's arranged like a library, like an archive file. And that is one of the most powerful images in Dreamcatcher, when Jonesy is hiding in his own mind. So love that. Some interesting Macbeth parallels, which I was noticing throughout because I studied Macbeth for my GCSEs and loved it. Obviously all the references to blood and not being able to get blood out of the hands and stuff felt very Macbeth, but then like it goes explicit. Sue says later on when we're in her mind and she's saying Macbeth hath murdered sleep, Carrie hath murdered time. So very deliberate references to Macbeth. We get a reference to one character, I think it's Billy, squeezing the wrist of Chris Hargensen and grinding those wrist bones together. That's something that comes up a lot, particularly in King's early work, as is the stuff in brackets interrupting the flow of the prose, so they grew out of that pretty quickly. I mentioned there's the image that Carrie has of the giant Jesus chasing her through corridors with a mallet, which makes me think of The Shining, of course. And I said previously on the Kingo card, there's lots of 19s, way more than I was expecting. I thought the 19 thing didn't really start until the Dark Tower started permeating, but let's rethink that, because here are the 19s I found in Carrie. So right on the very first page, the hail of stones was reported on the 19th of August 1966. On the 19th of August 1962, that's when Margaret White sends a letter to her mum saying how she and Ralph are living sinlessly. We know that's not true, but that's what she wrote anyway. A couple of addresses of note. Sue's address. She lives on Back Chamberlain Road at number 19. And then we get one of the testimonies, we get Cora and her talking about her friend Georgette Shires. Georgette Shires lived on Willow Street at house 217. Nearly said room 217 there, but 2 plus 17, obviously 19. And in one of the extracts from Sue's book, she explicitly points out that Billy Nolan was 19. So a bunch of 19s there right from the start. I got excited there. But the bit that I got most excited on, the catch that I don't think I've ever seen anyone reference. If I have, I've forgotten about it. But I was buzzing when I saw this. So when Billy and Chris are back at the roadhouse after they've dumped the blood and they're very frisky, we discover that Billy likes to call Chris Charlie when he's pleased with her, and he's tugging at her shirt and stuff, and he says the following. He says, "We're getting it on, Charlie, we're getting it on." Now that is exciting. That combination of words is exciting because, well, it's a reference to Rage, basically. So if you remember from Rage, the lead character in that is Charlie Decker, but the original title of Rage was Getting It On, and he talks about we're getting it on all the time. So this is fascinating because obviously Rage would come out as Richard Bachman. Wouldn't be a Stephen King thing for a long time, but right here in Carrie, right in the first book, we're getting it on, Charlie. Massive, massive clue about the Richard Bachman pseudonym. I was very pleased to spot that and actually let it permeate. So yeah, those are all the things I noticed for the first time. Something else I'm going to do in this wrap up of these rereads is give you my favourite line. Didn't mention that in the first list of stuff. There's a few I could have chosen, and I've already read out a bunch of them actually over the course of this vlog. So the one I'm settling for this final piece, on page 166 of my edition, this edition I'm reading from, and it's from the fictional book We Survived the Black Prom by Norma Watson. So this is one of the high school students, and this couple of lines just really sums everything up for me. So talking about the reaction to seeing Carrie covered in blood, we get, "Carrie had been the butt of every joke for so long, and we all felt that we were part of something special that night. It was as if we were watching a person rejoin the human race, and I, for one, thanked the Lord for it." And that happened. That horror. Like, brilliant, because that gives you a different insight into the classmates of Carrie. Yes, they admit that Carrie had been the butt of the jokes, but they actually really genuinely enjoyed seeing her have her moment. And then seeing it taken away like that. All the laughter is nervous laughter that just builds up and becomes hysterical. And obviously Carrie interprets it as the joke to end all jokes. But there it is. Her classmates did care about her in some way. And then the fact that it flipped over into that horrific stuff, really powerful. I think it really gives you a slightly different take on Carrie's classmates' reactions to her. And yeah, I'd never really noticed that line before, but really enjoyed it. So there it is. That's my favourite line. So lastly then, before we wrap up, and again, thank you for your patience and coming this far, I'm going to give it a rating. We're going to go for a rating out of 5. And, well, I'm going for 4. I'm going for 4 token nubs jiggling wildly out in front there. Sorry, couldn't resist. It's great. And on my Goodreads, I think I actually have it as 5. I probably will knock it down to 4 now, just because you've got to give that wiggle room. And I'm thinking with these rankings, these ratings, that ultimately I might revisit my entire ranking. So I can't go straight in with a 5. It's a 4, close to a 4.25. But I think the cons that I discussed sort of cap it at 4 really, because they are difficult to deal with. And you know, there were things I found frustrating this time around, but overall I had an absolute blast going back and rereading Carrie, and I think it holds up 50 years on. It really does hold up, and if you've never read Carrie before, give it a go. You might enjoy it. So there we go, reread of Carrie done, Carrie reading vlog done. Thank you for checking this out. Do stick around, I've got loads more stuff coming, got more adaptations to cover, but also if you're watching this video as it has dropped, we're on Carrie's birthday weekend, so that means there's more Carrie content as well. I will carry on with the Carrie content, as it were. So check the description for links to my quiz book, to the podcast, to my fiction, to my newsletter. But most of all, thank you for watching. Subscribe if you haven't done already. Tell a friend if you're already subscribed. Happy birthday, Carrie. Congratulations, Stephen King. Half a century in the business. Here's to many, many more years, and here's to lots more rereads on this channel.